Back in January 2023, I gave myself a challenge. Can I make a racing game with zero prior experience in game dev in just 7 days? The short answer was yes, kind of. What I ended up making was a small racetrack with a drivable car I modeled in Blender. And I remember the genuine excitement I felt waking up and getting to work on the project, because I'm someone who loves to learn new things and I have a good patience and determination once I set out to do something. And diving into game development, those qualities turned out to be super helpful. Today I want to talk about my journey going from that first racetrack with no experience to a full commercial release on Steam 3 years later. The game itself is called Apex Rush, and it actually releases today, same time as this video goes live. It would mean the world to me if you go and check it out. I'll leave a link to it in the description. So what prompted me to actually want to make a game? Well, I've played video games pretty much my whole life, and my favorite genre of games has always been racing games. Growing up, I played Colin McRae Rally when I was around 10 years old. I ended up getting the original Xbox with Need for Speed Underground 2, but also games such as The Simpsons Hit and Run, and of course GTA San Andreas. That was the foundation that got me into video games, and specifically the racing genre. Fast forwarding to the release of GTA 5, I was really into stunting, landing cool tricks using cool techniques, and that ended up being my job, funnily enough, for the next 13 years, making videos on GTA 5 with a focus on stunting and racing. Every now and then the idea of making a game would pop into my head, but it seemed too daunting having to learn stuff like C++ or other coding languages to start making games. I had all these ideas and I was very inspired by other games that I was playing, but I specifically knew that I wanted to make a racing game mixed with stunting. Now back to 2023, that's when I learned that Unreal Engine has this way of developing games called blueprints, which is a more visual way of making games using a node-based system. And this seemed a bit more enticing, at least getting my toes dipped into game development with this sort of easier way of coding. And this is when I ended up making that video of making a racing game in 1 week with no experience. Like I mentioned before, I very much enjoyed making the game, so naturally I kept working on it while also releasing devlogs on this channel about the progress on the game. About 3 months after I began the journey, I released a small playtest on itch.io, a website where indie devs can share their games for free. The game started to look pretty good here, and the vision of what it could become started to become more clear to me. I had also gotten a DM from 7HC, a talented 3D modeler who offered to remodel my car and add it to the game, to which I said, yes please. So we began working together, and shortly after he had created the Voltra, which was the first car to be added to Apex Rush. The little playtest ended up getting nearly 100,000 downloads, and players seemed to enjoy it. Some thought it was too difficult and that the controls needed more work, and they were 100% right, by the way. Which is why it's important to let other people test your games, because as the developer, you can get used to the janky controls when you're just working on the game constantly. But seeing the positive feedback and just the joy of watching someone play what you've made was so much fun. So shortly after, I decided, okay, maybe I can turn this into a full game. Deciding to continue the development of the game felt both exciting but also a bit scary. This meant that I would need to step down on the amount of videos that I was making on my channel, which, as I mentioned before, was also my full-time job, to have more time to spend on creating Apex Rush. So I took a bit of a gamble and started doing just that. The reason I say it's a gamble is because you don't really know how your game is going to perform, or even if you're going to finish the game, and I knew that it was gonna take time with all the features that I had in mind. So I began planning more of what exactly I wanted Apex Rush to be. The core gameplay features were time trial racing, a separate drift mode, car customization, and a track builder with a way to share your tracks with other players. And I thought, well, I kinda have the first part done already, so how long could the rest really take to add? One thing I did realize early on, which I'm very glad that I did, was that I could not do everything by myself with the ideas and vision I had for the game. I knew what strengths I had, and I also knew what I was lacking in completely, so I made a list of things I needed outside help with, which ended up being car modeling, sound design, and the advanced system needed for the track builder. 7HC that I mentioned earlier joined the team to work on all the car modeling and also creating the track pieces I was going to use for all the tracks. The track builder was going to be the way I built the tracks, but also allowing anyone else to use the same tools to create and share their own. So I reached out to a guy named Simon, whose plugins and tools I had seen on the Unreal Engine marketplace, and they shared similar techniques to what I had in mind for my track builder. I began planning out and sketching the ideas for how the UI would look and how it would work, and reached out to Simon to see if he wanted to work together. And it turns out that he had seen the first video that I made on Apex Rush, and we quickly aligned on an idea of how we could add a track builder to the game. Half a year later, in February 2024, I was getting a bit tired of my cars sounding like leaf blowers and listening to the same repeating engine loop for a year. So I found Kayo while scrolling YouTube, and he had made the best implementation of an engine sound I've seen so far, all inside of Unreal Engine. So I had to reach out and see if we could work something out. Shortly after, we decided to work together, and he has been killing it with every single engine sound implementation of the game. I kept grinding away during 2024, doing everything else that needed to be done, while still releasing a devlog every now and then showing the progress. By now the game had a Steam page up, and I was beginning to collect some of the first wish lists for the game, which was really cool. It wasn't until April 2024 that I began making some of the maps that actually ended up being in the final game. And if you look at this footage, you can see that I still hadn't completely figured out the art style that I was going for. The environment was more realistic compared to the stylized look of the cars being more low poly. The same year, I also spent a lot of time learning how to optimize the game, because even though the game is made in Unreal Engine, it shouldn't mean that it can't run well on lower end machines or devices. Up until then, I was just kind of adding features, not really thinking about performance, and ever since I've always made sure to optimize every little feature that I've added. I'm not using any expensive lighting techniques such as lumen or even any global illumination at all. Nanite is also not needed because the models in the game are mostly low poly. I've constantly checked the performance of the game on multiple PCs and used tools in Unreal such as Session Front End, which basically allows you to deep dive into what's going on behind the scenes of every frame being rendered. 2024 ended up being the year that most work got done in the front end, meaning things you visually see when playing, such as the maps, the new car models, sound design, customization system, getting most of that finished before focusing more on the backend stuff, like the code and functionality for the game modes, the Steam integrations, vehicle handling and physics, and so on. In March of 2025, the first trailer was released, which, looking back at it, you can see a massive difference in how far the game has come looks-wise compared to now, and the polish I've done during the final year of development. 2025 was the year everything had to be feature complete, so I could spend a couple months running playtests with a private test group. The biggest hurdle of 2025 was finishing the track builder. As Simon had to focus on his studies and exams, I took over all development of the track builder during the final year, finalizing how all the tracks are saved and validated, and most importantly, shared to the Steam workshop. This part alone took around 2 months to implement fully, as I had so much that I needed to learn. But I got it done, and I'm very pleased with how the entire track builder works now, from loading in to publishing the tracks to the workshop. The main focus was to make it very simple to use, but also offer more advanced tools to build the tracks, focusing on efficiency with, for example, showing the trajectory of the car when testing so it's easier to map out the landings, allowing for both grid-based and off-grid building, automatic distance snapping when you're placing the pieces, spawning at checkpoints you've already crossed for testing a specific section, and much more. And yeah, I'm very excited to see what players end up creating with the track builder. The majority of the final racetracks and challenges were also created last year. I had a ton of ideas saved, but it was time to finish them in the track builder and find the optimal medal times for all 36 tracks in the race mode. Last year was also when I began to market the game outside of just my YouTube channel, such as TikTok and Instagram, which has been very fun to gather feedback and of course market the game. The past month before launch, I focused heavily on the marketing, and it's been going very well. I think gaining over 12,000 wish lists in the past month alone. Marketing is always talked about as one of the hardest things to do as an indie developer, getting your game out there, and I can definitely understand why. I mean, I was lucky enough to have this YouTube channel as a nice boost when I first began marketing the game, but it was also really fun to basically start over from zero on a completely new account and begin marketing the game that way. Once I felt that the game was pretty much feature complete, it was time to begin the playtesting. And in my opinion, this ended up being the most important part of the whole development process. I invited about 30 players with different experience with racing games and asked them to test as much as they could and provide feedback. Most of the initial feedback had to do with stuff like UI navigation, difficulty tweaks, and just general quality of life improvements that I hadn't thought of at all. And of course there were a few bugs and stuff you could abuse in the game here and there, and some game-breaking shortcuts that I had to take care of. And I treated this playtest as like a mini launch for the game. You know, I was posting patches and hotfixes, adding a bunch of patch notes in the Discord server, and this also taught me how to actually release an update for your game on Steam without breaking anything. And yeah, the playtesting went on for about 3 months of actively updating and polishing the game, and this took the game to a very well polished state in my opinion. Even though the game is releasing in early access, you know, I'm still treating that as like the main launch and not like an excuse to release a buggy mess that I can fix later. I'm very pleased with the state the game is releasing in, and I think it's set up perfectly for content updates and adding more features to the game, which of course is the plan. And yeah, a massive shout out to all the playtesters, you guys have helped me out a ton. So when you have a finished game, you submit the build to Steam for review, which typically takes about 3 to 5 business days. After which they either approve the game or ask for you to fix something and resubmit the game again. I sent the game in for review at the beginning of January, and a week later, they replied with a very strange list of things that I had to fix. At first they said that the game only had 2 ways to customize the cars, but if you look at the game you have multiple categories and you have over 150 total parts to unlock. So I thought, okay, maybe they missed something. And they also said that the game doesn't work with a controller, you're unable to navigate any menus at all. When if you look at the game here, you can navigate easily and it changes the icons if you're using keyboard and mouse. So I replied very confused and I said like, I'm not sure what you mean, like it works perfectly for the playtester, for myself, like these issues are not apparent to any of us. So I double checked the build and I submitted for review again. Wait another week and they respond with pretty much the same issues. Now also noting that cloud saves aren't working properly. At this point I'm very confused, like I kept double checking everything and I just submitted it again. Now we're 2 weeks into waiting for an approval that should take like 3 to 5 days. As I'm waiting, I'm visiting my parents' house and I thought let's test the game on my dad's old computer to check the performance. And when I launched the game, I'm met with a main menu and a game version from November 2024, which as you know by now is not the finished version of the game at all. And I'm very confused, but I also saw that that account was not using the playtest version that I've been using for like the past 2 to 3 years. So it quickly dawned on me that that's what I've been submitting to Steam. The old 2024 build, which is when their feedback obviously made a lot more sense. So I raced back home, I fixed the issue on the development side of Steam, and I resubmitted the game. After a few days, they ultimately got back to me and I only had to change one thing, which was some issue with the achievements, and then it finally got approved after like 3 or 4 weeks of just waiting and being confused and not understanding why it was not passing. Now what's even scary to think about is, if that review had initially passed, I may not have noticed this, and the version that they check is what's being sold on Steam. So there was a chance that on launch day, people who bought the game would have launched the 2024 build and I would have had the most disastrous launch day I think I've ever could have had. And yeah, now we're here and it's launch day and I really hope that's not the case. I hope you guys got the right build. Yeah, it feels unreal after 3 years of grinding, pouring thousands of hours into something, to just release it and hope people enjoy it. It's a bit scary of course. I'm very proud of what I made and I love playing the game as much as I love developing it. I stuck to what I said I would do, release a game, and that feels really cool. It hasn't always been easy, it's the hardest thing I've ever done, but I've learned so much and I'm still excited to keep working on Apex Rush and possibly explore some other game ideas as well. If you purchase the game or wishlist it, just know I really appreciate it and I want to say thank you for supporting me on this journey. If you have a dream of making a game, or anything really, then go explore that dream because you never know what might happen and where that path will take you.